Good afternoon. You know, a good weekend is ahead because it's time for this week's thrilling instalment of the 100 Greatest Artists of All Time. And this week it's an important one because I think it's one of the most underrated groups of all time. Creedence Clearwater Revival gave us several of the best, most recognisable songs of the 60s, yet mysteriously they don't seem to be all that famous. Why? Is it because they were around for a relatively short period of time? They formed in 1968, they disbanded in 1972. Few modern bands would have released more than 2 records in this period, but CCR released 7. Their best 5 albums came in one magnificent 2-year period, 2 vintage years, 1969 and 1970. Apart from the Beatles, who also released 2 albums a year between 1963 and 1965, no other band has released so many classic albums in such a short period of time. The band was John Fogerty, his elder brother Tom Fogerty, Stu Cook and Doug Clifford. Although it seems like they were an overnight success story, they'd actually been in bands together since high school in 1959, first in the Blue Velvets and then in the awfully named Gollywogs. When the band became Creedence Clearwater Revival, the music style didn't change over much stylistically, but they just became a better band. It was still rhythm and blues, but the songs were developed more, and possibly the biggest change was that the younger brother became the dominant force. All the material from here on in was written by John Fogerty, whereas originally his elder brother Tom had been the main man. John also sang lead vocals, played guitar, could turn his hand to keyboards, harmonica and saxophone, and he was a producer too. A little bit like Dennis Waterman, who sang the theme tune and wrote the theme tune. The band's first hit record wasn't Fogerty composition though. It was a famous old rockabilly song, Susie Q. It was over 8 minutes long on the debut album of 1968, but for the purposes of a single, it was split across an A-side and a B-side for single release, and it reached number 11 in the USA. Then the vintage year, 1969. January, we released Bayou Country. The band's musical style expanded and incorporated elements from the blues and from southern rock. I mean, from the record titles, you'd think they were from New Orleans or somewhere. They weren't. They were a West Coast band, bizarrely. But the album was called Bayou Country. The album only went to number 7 in the USA, but it featured Proud Mary, a stone cold classic song. People know this song, but they think it's called Rolling, Rolling, Rolling Down the River and associate it with Ike and Tina Turner. But it was Creedence Clearwater Revival, really. Green River was another great album and included Bad Moon Rising. I feel a bad moon rising. It reached number 2 in the USA, and I'm proud to say it reached number 1 in the UK. Well done, Britain. There was still time in 1969 for another album, William the Poor Boys. From that album, Down on the Corner made number 3 in the charts, although surprisingly for such an awesome song, another awesome song, Fortunate Son only made number 14. Still, it hadn't been a bad year, had it? 3 top 10 albums and 4 top 3 singles in the USA. They never had a number 1 in the USA though. but they did deserve a rest. Didn't get much of one though. We began 1970 with a live album and a couple of double A side singles. Travelling Band, back with Will Stop the Rain, went to number 2, while Up Around the Bend and back with Run Through the Jungle reached number 4. The album Cosmo's Factory came out in July, another classic album, and it had their 5th US number 2 hit with Looking Out My Back Door, coupled with Long As I Can See the Light. It also had, on the album, an 11-minute version of Marvin Gaye's I Heard It Through the Grapevine. They never had a number 1 single in the USA, but the album made number 1. Then, in December, came their last great album, Pendulum. Fewer hits on it, and it peaked at a relatively lowly number 5 in the US. It was number 1 in the UK, though. The Beatles had just split up. So, in 1971, the Melody Maker voted them the best band in the world. They were at the top. And then it all began to go wrong. CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival, were very much dominated by John Fogerty because he was the talent in the band. And the others got jealous, to be honest. Even his own brother got jealous. Tom Fogerty left in 1971, and Cook and Clifford wanted it to become more of a democracy. They wanted their songs to appear on the next album. Sadly, they got their way on the last album by CCR. Mardi Gras, each band member got his own songs, and each got a chance to sing lead vocal. John Landau in Rolling Stone declared it the worst album I have ever heard from a major rock band. Quality control had gone out of the window. Fogerty was also in dispute with the record company because the record contract only gave a very low royalty rates. It's no surprise that the band split up. Lawsuits continued long after the band had disbanded and after Fogerty had signed over publishing rights of all of his Creedence Clearwater Revival songs. On one farcical occasion, Fantasy Records, the record label for Creedence Clearwater Revival, sued John Fogerty for plagiarising himself because his solo song, Old Man Down the Road, ripped off Run Through the Jungle. Sanity prevailed in the courtroom and Fogerty won the case. Fogerty never replicated the success solo that he'd had with Creedence Clearwater Revival, but he did finally make it to the top of the US singles charts with a track called Centerfield in 1975. Track about baseball, it didn't really cross over to this country. And this will surprise many of you, a track you all know, Rockin' All Over the World, Status Quo track, that was originally written by John Fogerty, not by Status Quo. And that was, I think, also a number 1 in the UK. Creedence Clearwater Revival were not an innovative band. They weren't over-sophisticated. They were just back to basics, rock and roll, rhythm and blues. They were just very, very good masters of their craft. And that is why their music has lasted well. They sold 28 million records in the USA alone. And even if you don't know the band, you know their songs. They are played regularly to this day.